Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. Today, we have the privilege of having with us Mr. Franklin Elume Francis, and this topic he will be speaking to is employee grievance and conflict management. Employee grievance and conflict management. I'd like to read about his background, professional background, so that we can get better acquainted with him and give him the necessary attention and cooperation as we engage and discuss tonight. Franklin is a highly accomplished and experienced HR and business executive with a diverse background in various industries such as power, manufacturing, telecoms, automotive, consulting, publishing, banking, and non-governmental service sector. He is currently the head human resources at Ibadan Electricity Distribution Company and was the head of employee relations at Ikeja Electric PLC, the two largest power distribution companies in Nigeria. Franklin is the lead consultant of Frank Michael Consulting Limited, a full-spectrum HR consulting firm that operates in Lagos and Ibadan. His career spans well over 18 years, during which he has developed and honed his skills in HR and business management. Some of his key areas of expertise include industrial relations, administrative leadership, organizational process reengineering, strategic HR business partnering, and so on and so forth. As an industrial relations expert, Franklin has a proven track record of ensuring peace and harmony within organizations, which ultimately contributes to enhanced productivity. Again, it's important to note that Franklin holds several professional certifications, including being a certified senior professional human resource international SPHRI. He is a full member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria, CIPM, and also of the Institute of Training and Development. His educational background includes degrees, from Federal University of Technology, Akure, Ondo State, and the University of Lagos, Nigeria. Apart from his current roles, he is also a very active member of the Foursquare Gospel Church of Nigeria, where he actively works in the Sunday school department. He is involved in several other volunteer work as he always strives to give back to the society. Again, with respect to the CIPM, he has been a member of the membership committee of CIPM at national level and also served as the vice chairman of the Apapa chapter of the Lagos branch of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management. He has also been involved with welfare activities in this same chapter. On a personal note, Frank is a family man and is blessed with plenty of children. Outside of work, he has a diverse set of hobbies, including traveling, table tennis, volleyball, football, reading, writing, and nurturing personal growth in others. Tonight, for the first time on this prestigious platform, I present to you Franklin Elume Francis. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oluyemi Adeosun. Thank you for that intro. I'd like to say thank you for what you're doing within the HR space. I know it's a very demanding one, ensuring that a program like this comes on, at least 3 times a week, and you've been doing it over the months, over the years. I'd like to thank you most sincerely for what you are doing for the HR community. I also want to thank you for the opportunity that you have given to me this evening to make a presentation. I'm here to share my thoughts really on employee grievance and conflict management. Now, this platform is for HR practitioners. And so if you look at the topic, I'm sure that in the course of your career as an HR practitioner, you must have come across these words. You must have experienced, these words in your place of work. In the course of your career, you know what an employee is, you know what grievance is, and of course, you know what conflict is. Where these things exist, the importance of managing them, also comes to bear. And so this is what we'll be looking at today. I would encourage that you pay very close attention and let's learn together tonight. The Q&A button is there. Please use it to ask your questions. And at the end of the presentation, for those who want to speak, opportunity will be given. As much as possible, I will try to be fast because we have a lot to talk about this evening within the ambit of this topic. All right, so let's get into it. Now, what are we looking at this evening? Of course, the introduction is part of the things that we'll look at. We'll look at the types of grievances and conflicts that we see at work. We also look at how to handle employee grievances, and then what are the causes of conflict. We also look at conflict resolution strategy. Of course, we look at the implication for unresolved grievance and conflict. We also make some recommendations, and then it will be time for Q&A. All right, so moving on. A few statistics here I'd like us to look at when we talk about employee grievance and conflict management. Now, the first one is, this is by Expert HR. It says nearly a third, that's 30% of employers have seen employee grievances rise over the past 2 years, particularly around relationships and pay. And so this statistics is drawing our attention to the role relationships and pay, can play in terms of employee grievances at work. And I think this statistics is very important for our discussion tonight. Now, another statistic I want to look at here is, according to Expert HR, relationships with managers or colleagues is the most common reason for grievance being raised. But many employees are raising concerns with their pay or grading as living costs surge. Now, there are a few things I'd like us to look at here. One is that, when you talk about employee grievance, you're talking about relationships that, of course, exist in the place of work. Relationship, line managers, downlines, as it is called now, and of course, colleagues. And then it's also saying that beyond these relationships, you also find employees raising, issues around their pay, particularly looking at the cost of living in Nigeria, as it were. You agree with me that the cost of living has taken an alarming dimension, and all of this definitely will cause grievance at work. Now, the other statistic I want to look at here is that the top 3 reasons for employee grievances are bullying or harassment, and this accounts for whooping 67%, of the reasons why we see grievances at work. Bullying and harassment is a major reason that we see this happen. And of course, relationship with line managers account for 54%. And then we see relationship with colleagues accounting for 49%. However, 37% of respondents, reported pay and grading system, just as, the earlier statistics are shown to us. And the final statistics that I want to share here is by, a research that was done by CIPD. It says 31% of employees in their survey had experienced conflict. Who had experienced conflict said the person they reported it to didn't take the conflict seriously. Almost half, about 48%, felt the other person took precedence. Now, you agree with me that this is actually not what they don't take them seriously. They tend to sway towards the part of the line manager and not the person who has raised such issue. Now, so this is what the survey has shown to us, and I'm sure you will agree with who are the who an employee is. And I just describe an employee as somebody who has been employed to work for some form of payment under a contract, under contract of employment. And of course, what is employee grievance? Employee grievance is a concern, a problem or complaint that an employee has about their work, the workplace, or somebody they work with. Now, if you look at this definition closely, you will see that employee grievance is always around their work, what people do at work, the kind of work they do, what their line managers make them do at work, can be a source of grievance. And then the workplace itself, the work environment, where people sit to do their work, the tools they have to work with, the conditions surrounding their employment can also be, another source of grievance. And of course, the person they work with, which is a major cause of grievance in the workplace. The people they work with, their line managers, their colleagues, all of this contribute to what, leads to employee grievance. Now, it speaks about dissatisfaction and what the employees themselves consider to be unfair. So you see that employee who is angry, for instance, an employee who is angry is always issues around dissatisfaction, with the condition of work. They feel that they are unfairly treated. This leads to grievance. And then the final thing here is that employee grievance refers to a formal complaint or concern raised by an employee regarding any aspect of employment, work environment, or interaction. Now, when it is formal, then it has to be documented. Of course, we have the informal ones, which some employees may not raise concern about formally, but yet you see that it affects, their approach to work and their commitment level. So this is talking about what an employee is, and of course, what an employee grievance is. Now, what I have here is types of grievance. You agree with me that, they are quickly talk about three types of grievances that we see at work. The first one is individual. Now, for an individual who is angry, you see that sometimes it's around demotion. Something may have happened at work, and the outcome is that they are demoted, from their present grade, to a lower one, or they are redeployed to a role which they consider to be a demotion. This can cause grievance at work. And of course, a query. Sometimes employees are giving queries at work, and this leads to grievance. And the way the employees see it, the query basically we say is, a call for explanation. Something has happened, and you want explanation, as to what happened and how these things happened. Sometimes employees take it, like it's war, like it's fight, like, war has been declared. And so they are aggrieved, they are angry because of the query that they have been given. Individual grievance can also arise from harassment. When employees feel harassed, when they feel bullied, individual grievance can occur. And then the second one here is group. Sometimes, it can be a department, it can be an ethnic group. Now, if it's a department, you see people in a particular department saying that, the organization or the management does not treat people in that department fairly, or they feel that a particular department deserves better treatment. And so those in other departments, are now hungry. A quick example you can give here is that sometimes for some organizations, they tend to treat people in the IT department, better than others. And so others are now hungry because of that kind of treatment. So it happens for a department. Again, you could also see situations where, management has decided to increase the salary of those in a particular department. Maybe they feel that the attrition rate is high for that department, and they want to make people stay. They want to make, the average pay for that department competitive. And so they single out a department, for salary increment. And then grievances, is the outcome of the whole thing for that department. And of course, you also have ethnic group. For some organizations, you hear that people from a particular ethnic group either don't get promoted or they are not fairly treated in an organization. And so those who are from that ethnic group, they see themselves as being marginalized. And so what you have is group grievance in this instance. And then the last one which I want to speak about here is union. We speak about industrial relations in organization, and sometimes you see the union, some of the things that you see in this regard is when where a promotion exercise has just been concluded, and the union feels that those of their members who were promoted or who benefited from that exercise were very few, or they feel that the executives, are not being considered for certain benefits. And so the union is angry, and you have this third type that I've talked about here. Now, moving on, what are the causes of grievance in the workplace? A number of things lead to this, and I'll speak about some of them very quickly. You have biased behavior. When employees feel that they are not fairly treated, like it's not a fair playground for everybody. Like, some people will do certain things and then they get away with it. You find it, happen to others, and then it's taken seriously. It's a cause of grievance in the workplace, biased behavior. And the encouragement here is that it should be a level playing field for everybody. There shouldn't be sacred cows. The MD's, children of the MD's friend, they were recommended by somebody who is close to the MD, or they are even relatives of the MD. And so for that reason, whatever they do, they get away with it. Now, others will become angry because of this biased behavior. And we see these things happen across organizations. Sometimes it's even in our departments. You see your head of department, having soft spot for certain people, and so they are more fairly treated than others. Is a cause of grievance at work. Now, the next one is lack of proper communication. Now, this is a major one which I need us to pay very close attention to. Where communication is not clear to both parties, grievances will be the outcome of the day. Because when you communicate and expectations are there, and the other person who is supposed to action, the outcome of that communication does not fully understand what has been said, at the end of the day, expectations cannot be met. And when expectations are not met, grievance is what you find at the end of the day. So lack of proper communication is a major reason. Some of the things you see here is that some management don't clearly communicate to employees the state of the organization. And so some employees will now feel that the company is not fair to them. The company is not paying certain benefits that they are supposed to get, whereas the company itself is struggling to stay afloat at that time. So lack of proper communication, of course, can be a cause of grievance at work. Now, the next thing I need to speak about here is payout and perks. Some benefits, are for certain people. Some payouts are for certain people, and it's not for everybody. It's not a level playing field for all. Some benefits just go out to some people, and nothing can be hidden, really. For some companies, you find this payout, go to specific people, and they feel that the others will not get that information. There's nothing that is hidden. And what we encourage there is that the organization should be fair to all to avoid grievance arising from payouts and perks. Now, the next thing here is working time and conditions. Sometimes you see certain people work so late, into the evening in the office, and they expect that somehow they'll be compensated. This compensation is not guaranteed. It may not come, and what you find is that at the end of the day, they are hungry. Sometimes, it's as a result of the working conditions. Some people don't have, adequate work tools to do their job. Some are not fairly treated. The working conditions, of course, can be a cause of grievance at work. And of course, we have the harassment, bullying, and discrimination. In some organizations, you have very high rates of harassment, bullying, and discrimination. Certain people are harassed because of the earlier reasons that I've given, maybe because of their ethnic group, or because of reasons that you really cannot explain. Some people are harassed because they feel that they are too ambitious in the organization. Now, I've seen a situation whereby an employee who is highly ambitious, pursuing various academic qualifications, professional certifications, and the line manager or the head of department feels that this person is trying to take my position. And of course, what you get is harassment, trying to frustrate such person, from the organization. It's a good, very, very good reason for grievance in the organization. And we're encouraged to stay away from things like this. Now, leadership issues. Now, a lot is expected of the leader. If the leader is not well-grounded, the leader does not know how to delegate, if the leader does not know how to communicate, all of this can lead to grievance at work. So, the expectation is that leaders should be well groomed. People cannot, come on and be people who go, they stay there. Once you jump, I will come down. So for the organization, we should expect that people who are taking time to themselves, people who are grown up, are who play position, people of friends, people now where you probably are not able to do yesterday and what find it. I'm moving on. All of these I've given, there's a major corporate, and that I like to highlight in my next slide. And the major corporate, according to this group of gentlemen, which I call 3 A's and A's. Hello, network struck again. I have to switch to another network. Please permit me to share my screen. Hello, Mr. Ayemi, can you hear me?
Yes, so I can hear you, but while we are waiting, you can just continue talking, sir.
Okay. All right. So the major culprit, according to these 3 gentlemen, is that, they say problem of poor communication is one of the main causes of conflict between employees in the workplace.
Now. Try now,
Okay.
sir.
Okay, fine. All right. So they said here that the problem of poor communication is one of the main causes of conflict between employees in the organization. Now, this can result from a difference in communication styles or a failure to communicate. You agree with me that this is a major culprit here. Sometimes the way we communicate, they say the way we communicate, the body language that follows the actions, all of these things form, the full, they impact the full meaning that people can make from whatever communication that has taken place. So if we communicate and it's not very clear, it's not in the simplest form for people to understand, we're likely going to be misunderstood. And I've said earlier that when there's misunderstanding, you find out that there's conflict, there's grievance because expectations are not properly communicated. So it is very important that we take communication seriously. Whatever it is that we're communicating, we should ensure that the other party fully understands the message that we're passing across. Now, where that understanding does not exist, conflict, grievance is what you'll find at the end of the day. Again, our communication style varies. For some people, they communicate, with high pitch. Sometimes the voice is so loud and they scream, they shout at people. And then others will make different meanings out of all of these things. And what you find is that they are either angry, and all of this eventually will lead to conflict. So this study that they carried out in 2019 highlighted communication as a main reason, particularly when the communication is poor. All right, so moving on, how then do you handle employee grievances? As HR practitioners, these are things that will come across on a daily basis. You see our employees, our colleagues walk up to us to say that they don't like the way their line manager is treating them. They don't like the way a colleague, is treating them. These are things that come to our table on a daily basis. How then do we as HR people respond to these complaints when they come? I have a number of them that I've stated here. Now, for HR professionals, the first thing that needs to happen is that there must be a grievance policy. Now, this grievance policy is so important because it spells out how to handle these complaints when they do come up. Where there is no policy, people resort to gut feeling. They feel that this is the way to handle it. Bias comes into play because there is no clear guidelines on how to handle grievances at work. So it is very expedient that HR professionals ensure that there is grievance policy that can guide the other HR people, the entire organization, on how to resolve issues around grievance. So it is very important. I'd like to encourage at this point in your respective organization, please take a second look at your grievance policy. Is it well crafted, that it provides very clear guidance on how issues around grievance should be addressed? So please take a second look at it and ensure that if there's the need to update this, you do just that. Now, the next thing that I have here is that we are to encourage open communication. Sometimes when we keep information away from others, they're allowed to second guess, and then whatever meanings they make out of that guides their actions. And of course, grievance is the outcome of the day. The example I gave earlier, that where an organization is not doing very fine and certain benefits are not being paid. Now, if this communication is not clear to employees, what you find out is that they feel that management does not want to pay their benefits, and then they are angry, and all of this has very great impact, on their work. So we have to encourage open communication. We have to communicate in the simplest form and check with the other party to ensure that they fully understand what we have communicated to them. Now, the next thing here is that we have to train managers and HR personnel. Now, this is very important. Now, I've seen line managers who don't know how to communicate. For instance, they have a target they want to communicate to the other employees that the unit or the department is supposed to pursue. Sometimes the way they go about, communicating this target is such that employees themselves are not motivated. You see that the drive to even achieve these things, is dead from the very beginning because they are not motivated. So we have to train managers. It's not just by promotion. It's not because somebody has done well in the course of the year, you reward such person, with promotion. As we promote our colleagues at work, we should ensure that we equip them to be able to function as managers, and this is very important, like I said. And so the HR personnel themselves also have to be trained because, a number of times employees will come to the HR department to make inquiries or to ask for certain things. Now, these things they're asking for may not be available. The policy may not support what they're asking for. The way and manner the HR person communicates this to the employee will lead to grievances. And so it is very important that the HR personnel are also trained on how to handle issues around this. Now, the next thing is that we need to document grievances. We're talking about how to handle employee grievances. This should be documented, from when it is escalated, to when the process, is completed. We must have it documented. It is important we do that. Now, the next thing I also need to talk about here is that when the issues are escalated, we must ensure that they are investigated. Sometimes these grievance issues, are not really, something that can be established. Sometimes it's not really an issue that should lead to grievance, but sometimes you see these employees, they just come up with such complaints. And it's important that HR persons, do thorough investigation, and they also have to be very impartial in the course of carrying out their investigation. The reason for this is that the truth has to be established. The issues that have been raised, what are the facts around it? Is it actually an issue of grievance, or it is coming from one kind of bias or the other? So we have to ensure that as HR personnel, we thoroughly investigate whatever escalation that comes to us. Now, the next thing is we need to mediate, and we also need to resolve. Now, what does mediation and resolution mean? You need to intervene, bring the two parties together, and then ensure that you are able to find out what the cause of the grievance is, what are their positions, what are their prayers, what can be comfort to both parties. How do we ensure that both parties, work together for the benefit of the organization? This is very important. And HR personnel should be equipped with this knowledge, to be able to handle employee grievances at work. Now, the next thing is we have to review, and then we have to make decisions. Now, we've received the former complaints of grievances at work. We have thoroughly investigated. We have brought the two parties together, and now we have to review all that we have seen. All of the documents, all of the facts that have been presented to us, we need to review, and this, of course, will lead to whatever decision that we need to make. Now, the final thing I need to speak about here is we need to implement corrective actions. Now, for every grievance that is raised, there are actions that we must take to forestall a reoccurrence. Sometimes we need to educate our employees. Sometimes we need to make them know, how to communicate. So these things are very important. We must implement corrective actions to forestall reoccurrence. So it is not just for us to resolve a particular grievance. We need to look beyond it to ensure that, we put appropriate measures in place to avoid a reoccurrence. Right, moving on. How do we stop employee grievances? This is also very important. If you have comments, like I said in the beginning, please drop them in the comment section. I hope we're making sense tonight. We're talking about employee grievance and conflict management, which I say it's a common occurrence at work. And I'm trying to provide, some steps on how to resolve this. Now, talking about how to stop employee grievance at work, there are certain things we must do. We are not to allow problems fester. Once these issues are escalated to us, we must take action immediately. Sometimes employees are just a minute away from confrontation. The employee is very angry, that is unfairly treated and has come to you as HR to make a report. So if we allow these issues to fester, what may happen at the end of the day is confrontation, and then people are injured at work and all of that. So once an escalation is made as an HR professional, you have to ensure that it does not fester, act on it as quickly as possible. So you have to have employees who are well skilled in handling grievances at work in the HR department so that they can quickly, swing into action when these issues are escalated. Now, the next thing is that we need to set and maintain clear expectations. I talked about this earlier. When you talk about communication, we earlier highlighted it as a major culprit, for employee grievance. In trying to communicate at work, we need to set clear expectations. What do you expect of your colleague? As a line manager, what do you expect of your downline? Yes, the expectations must be clear, to the employee so that they can work towards achieving it. Now, the next thing is we need to refrain from positions to issues. Now, this is very common and it's very important we look at it. Sometimes you look at the line manager, an employee has raised an issue that has caused grievance for him or her. And as an HR person, you want to support the line manager. You just want to believe that the line manager is doing the right thing because you feel it's pursuing a target that the entire department is interested in, the entire organization is interested in. And so for that reason, you shift to addressing the position instead of the issues. We are to divorce positions from issues. What are the issues that have been raised? Let's focus on the issues and deal with it. Let's not look at position. Let's not look at, who is occupying what position and who is occupying the other. If we focus on positions, we will not be able to stop employee grievances at work. So it is important that we look at the issues, separate the persons from the issues, and address it, to a logical conclusion. We're talking about how to stop employee grievances, in the workplace. The other point I have here is a bit funny. I said, beware of alcohol. That's a typo there. Beware of alcohol and know your audience. For some people, each time they taste alcohol, they tend to misbehave. So it is important that while at work, people stay away from alcohol. The HR department, the organization as it were, cannot tell people how to live their lives outside of work. But, when they take alcohol and then they find themselves within the workplace, sometimes they tend to misbehave. An issue that they are ordinarily supposed to look at, and just overlook it, they tend to make a fuss out of it, and sometimes, they overreact and then the others are hungry. Then you need to know your audience. Sometimes the way we talk, we are not careful in knowing who our audience is. It's not a one-cap-fit-all kind of thing. We dissect who our audience is, and then we devise appropriate means to reach out to them. We're talking about how to stop employee grievance. And this is very important, really, this point, knowing your audience. For particular audience that we have, you may find out that you speak to them in a certain way. They don't make an issue out of it. Nobody is angry. What you speak to is different audience in that same manner. Everybody is angry and they are like, who are you? Who do you think you are talking to? They start reacting to this. And so it's important we know our audience to be able to dissect and make have proper communication. The next thing here is we need to manage perception. Sometimes people just perceive that this is what you're trying to do. They just make all of these conclusion, and so they start reacting to it. We need to manage perception. So as we talk and as we carry out our duties, we need to check out what are the others, what the other people, what do they make of what we have done, or the things we want to do. As HR people, we want to roll out certain communication, certain policies. We want to carry out certain initiatives. We need to imagine what the perception of the other employees will be like. How would they see it? How would they react to it? Sometimes there are changes that we need to implement. We need to look at what perceptions they will make of it. So all of this will help us in trying to stop employee grievance at work. Now, the other thing I need to speak about here is we need to use power judiciously. Sometimes some employees, once you put them in position of authority, they tend to overdo things. They tend to talk down on every other person that is working under them. Power is transient, they say. And for us, we need to use it judiciously. If you're in a position of authority, you're in a position of power, beware not to treat the others as if they don't have, brains in their heads, for instance. So as leaders, as HR people, we need to use the powers that we have judiciously. Now, moving on, what is the role of HR in handling employee grievance and conflict at work? A few things are put here. I talked about the grievance policy earlier, and here I'm trying to state what the main objective of this policy will be. So the objective of the grievance policy and procedure is to provide a means of dealing promptly with any grievance that an employee or employees may have in connection when they do arise.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir.
Hello, sir. You can go ahead. You can proceed.
Can we hear him speak, or is it me?
I can't hear him, sir.
Okay, I can't hear him speak too.
issues around grievance and conflict. The point I was talking about is having a dedicated means for of issues of grievance and conflicts. Now, this is very important. The means by which employees can escalate these issues must be clear and known to all. Are they hungry? Are there conflicts, that they want to escalate? This is the way by which they can escalate it. It is important to have a dedicated email address for such escalations. If you want them to write a letter,
Go ahead,
hello,
sir.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right. So
Yes,
okay. I was talking about having a dedicated means for escalation, and I think I completed that point before the internet struck again. Now, the next thing is you need to ensure that all parties are listened to. Now, this is very important. Sometimes hearing a person out, might just be 50% into solving the problem. So you need to ensure that the parties that have raised that issue are listened to. Just patiently listen to them. And I tell you, you're on the way to resolving the issues. Now, the next point is we need to ensure that the approach is clear to the blind and audible to the deaf. So if you are addressing an issue, for instance, the way you arrive at your conclusion should be clear to all. So if somebody has done wrong, at the end of it all, the person should come to that realization that indeed he or she took a wrong step, that led to the whole thing. So you must be very clear. You must be very fair. You must be clear to all that, you treated it as fairly as possible to avoid further grievances. Now, let all parties agree to the final outcome. Now, sometimes in the course of addressing issues around grievances at work, you let all parties agree. And that was why earlier I spoke about what their expectations are. What are your prayers? For you that has raised these complaints, what do you expect? Is it that you don't like the way this person communicates to you, or you don't like the tone of their mail, or you don't like the way the person shouts or something? So your expectations has to be clear. And once you have that clarity, you're able to work towards the solution. And at the end of it all, we expect that all parties will agree to the outcome. Now, that does not mean that everybody must agree, in all circumstances. But the whole essence is to ensure that all parties agree to the outcome. Now, the last point here is that we should not fail to apply appropriate disciplinary measure where necessary. And that is to say that, where an infraction has been highlighted, that requires disciplinary measures, we should not fail as HR practitioners to do justice to that. Now, ensure that we support managers on the front line. Sometimes the managers on the front line are so much, faced with the need to achieve their targets that they care, or they don't seem to realize that the way they communicate with their downlines is very important. So as I have said earlier, line managers need to be supported for them to be able to communicate appropriately to other employees. Now, what are the causes? Now, some of the things that I would like to mention here is that in a workplace, you have personality differences. This leads to conflicts. You just find out that certain people don't want to associate with others. There is no conflict, there is no grievance, there is nothing. They just don't like their personality. I don't like your face. I don't like the way you dress. I don't like the way you talk. You have not had any direct issue with that person, but for one reason or the other, the person does not just like you. So we have personality differences at work. And as HR practitioners, we should be careful and understand that, these personality differences are noted in our dealings with other colleagues. Now, the other thing is poor communication, which I've talked about earlier, unclear job expectations, unrealistic needs and expectations. I've also talked about this earlier. Poor work habits. poor work habits. You know, so situation, for instance, where if the line manager has not gone home, has not closed for the day, the downlines cannot leave. They cannot close, you know, from work because their line manager or the head of department is still at work. Sometimes the line manager who will keep them waiting for him to close before they leave, maybe somebody who will come very late to work, or somebody who will not do what he's supposed to do during the working hours. It may be somebody who is more comfortable working late in the evening. And for that reason, you want to keep your others in your department. You want to keep them, you know, working late into the night. Poor work habits can be a cause of conflict at work. It just work together. You know, it's like bringing water and fire together. Some team members cannot work together, and of course, it's a cause of conflict. And then the last thing here is resistance to change. Some employees don't want change at all. They feel change is not, it can't be in their interest. You know, sometimes they feel that the current system they are working with is good, is fair. Why do you want to change it? Advantages change itself will come with. They are just resistant to change. And because of this, they don't want to agree with whatever you're doing. You know, they try to make conflict out of every situation because they want to resist change. Now, just to compare what conflicts and grievances are, I just try to put these two together. Now, grievance, I've said earlier, is a specific complaint or dissatisfaction that an individual or group has about something they feel has been done wrongly to them. That's what a grievance is. Why conflict refers to a situation where two or more parties have opposing goals, belief, or interests that create tension or disagreement. That's to say that conflict is not always bad, really. Sometimes, you know, we're working together. Sometimes what you believe in, you know, is contrary to what the other person believes in. And this obviously will lead to conflict and disagreement. Sometimes tension, you know, is what you find in such teams. Now, conflict can arise in any area of social life. You have conflict, you know, and sometimes this leads to verbal or physical confrontation. Some people can not just patiently state their position. You know, once something is, they are not in agreement with something, they tend to go physical. You know, you see them reacting to it spontaneously and violently, you know, at work. And so in trying to compare what conflict and grievance is, I'm saying here that conflict is a broader concept that refers to the opposition of different interests. You know, sometimes conflict itself would eventually lead to better ways of doing things. We are not in agreement as to our approach, but if we're able to sit down to discuss this, we'll likely come up with something that is workable to both parties. While grievance, of course, is a specific complaint, like I've said before. Now, what are the possible outcomes of grievance meetings? We've talked about the reason to, the need to investigate, the need to hear both parties and bring them together to understand what the issues are. Now, what are the possible outcomes of such grievance meetings? Now, it is very clear. Sometimes the grievance is upheld, that the grievance is genuine, you know, that Mr. Hay has every reason to be angry. You know, it may be a possible outcome by the time you listen to both parties. And of course, it's also possible that the grievance is partially upheld. You know, in this instance, you find out that the line manager has a genuine message to communicate, but the way the line manager has gone about it may have led to a grievance. And so it can be partially upheld. And then the last one here is that the grievance is not upheld at all. It's a possible outcome. The employee who has raised a complaint of, you know, of why he or she is angry, you may find out that there's really no substance to it. So it's a possible outcome. And so these are the three outcomes that you can find, you know, from a grievance meeting. Now, it is worthy to note here that employee conflict resolution doesn't necessarily have to end in an agreement. Sometimes it is best to disagree respectfully. It is best to agree to disagree respectfully. You know, what I'm saying here basically is that where you disagree, please state it respectfully. The fact that you disagree with a position or an idea does not mean that you should react to it violently. Now, when that happens, employees should acknowledge a difference in opinion and an opinion or approach and come up with a solution together on how to move forward. Now, this becomes practicable where both parties have their eyes on the goal. They both know that they have to achieve. The department has to function. The department has to achieve. But there's a conflict. There's a grievance issue. You know, that that desire to achieve together should make both parties come together to find, a way to progress. Now, conflict resolution strategy. Now, where there's a conflict, there has to be resolution. And this model has been put together by Kenneth and Ralph. They developed 5 conflict resolution strategies that people should use to handle conflict. And I'm just going to state them in the next 2 slides. Sometimes it is defeating, sometimes compromising, sometimes it is avoiding. Where there's a conflict, you sometimes find both parties, fighting to defeat the other. My position is superior to yours, and so I want to defeat you. This is a strategy that some people adopt in trying to resolve conflicts. Now, the other thing is they could be compromising. Both parties will just agree. I'm ready to shift my sword, provided you're able to convince me. The other person could also have the same opinion. And so what you find at the end of the day is that there's a compromise. Now, the third one here is avoidance. Sometimes because of a conflict, people start avoiding themselves. They don't want to work together. They don't want to talk to themselves. It's also a strategy that some people adopt. Now, the other ones is that they could be accommodating, accepting, and cooperating. I know this is the problem that you have. I know this is the way you talk. I'm not going to raise an issue with you. I'm not going to disagree with you. Whatever you say is fine. Now, we're just going to cooperate with you. There's a possible strategy, and then collaborating. Now, in the next slide, I have tried to put all of this in a picture format where we can easily see this conflict resolution strategy. Same model which I spoke about earlier, but you find some explanation around this. Now, I talked about competing. You win, I lose. And this mentality is where a party feels that I must win this conflict. I must win this agreement. Whatever it is, I must win. I'm not ready to shift. I'm not ready to listen to you. And so competing, like I spoke about earlier. And then you have those who are collaborating. I spoke about it. And those who are accommodating, avoiding, and then compromising. Now, where you see the approach tending towards avoiding or accommodating, empathy has taken the day. Empathy obviously would not give us the kind of results that we're looking for. So empathy, where empathy is the order of the day, you find them either avoiding themselves or trying to accommodate one another. Now, where there's assertiveness, what you find is low empathy and low assertiveness. And this is where avoidance is also taking place. And then the last one here is where there's low empathy and high assertiveness, and that leads to competition. All right, so what is the implication of unresolved grievance and conflict at work? Because the implications are far-reaching. Grievance takes the form of collective dispute, like I said before, when they are unresolved. So what I'm saying here basically is that when somebody is aggrieved, somebody is angry, and that others who may be aware of what has happened. And so it becomes over time, becomes a collective dispute. You find some people are they're taking sides, they've joined in resolved grievance and conflict at work. Again, they will then lower the morale and efficiency of the employees if left unattended to. Where conflicts and grievances are unattended to. Unattended solutions. Consider the interest in pursuing organizational goals and objectives. It is important that you consult workers. Consulting workers does not mean that the workers will dictate what should happen or how it should happen. Sometimes just bringing it to their knowledge in the form of a meeting or carrying them along, you're able to get their buy-in into whatever action the management is interested in. Again, it is also important that we note this. There should be proper and adequate means of effective communication flow between the management team and employees. For some organizations, it's only the management team that is aware of what is happening in the organization, and this obviously will not help situation. There should be a proper way to communicate. Of course, not all information is meant for everybody in the organization, but those that they need to know, we should have adequate ways of ensuring that that communication goes out. Now, workers to pursue their aims with maturity, tolerance, patience, and objectives. Now, they should also they should not exhibit radicalism and bias process to show off their power. You know, sometimes you find out that at work, what the organization has been doing for employees, for some reason, there may be a delay. Now, workers are expected to show maturity and tolerance, you know, that the organization does not behave this way, usually, that for things to be happening like this, you know, certainly there is a problem. So employees are encouraged, workers are encouraged to show maturity and tolerance when issues do occur at work. And of course, the last point is that management should set up employee grievance committee to work on the issues of employee complaints. All right, so I apologize once again for what the internet, network 3 service providers, it's been on and off. So this is the end of my presentation. If you have questions, you're free to ask. You either type your questions or mute and speak. Thank you, Mr. Oluyemi, for this opportunity, and thank you all the participants. If there are no questions, I assume that I've done justice to the presentation today. Any question?
Hello.
Hello, okay, I can hear you.
Good evening. I'm well done, man. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I was thinking that you will emphasize the area of mediation in conflict resolution. What is the place of mediation in conflict resolution? Because many times it is very critical to find a way of mediating so as to assuage parties involved, so that at the end of the day, it becomes a win-win situation. So when you're talking about conflict resolution, it's that way. So at the end of the day, a lot of issues that we imagine may not be resolved is oftentimes resolved because of the intervention of mediators. And because it's not a court, it's not a question of where somebody is being blamed or condemned for his or action. It helps a great deal to assuage both parties and make the workplace a better place. Thank you. That's my comment.
All right. Thank you so much, Bracken, for shedding more light on that. I actually mentioned it, mediation and resolution. As you can see on your screen, it's very important, like you mentioned. Sometimes parties just want to be listened to. In the course of mediation, you're able to identify what the issues are and address them accordingly. Thank you once again, Bracken.
Thank you. Well done. God bless you.
So I'm seeing some questions. Thank you. I'm seeing some questions here. Thank you for the kind words. Okay, I think I have a question here. Do an exited employee go directly to NICN? Yes, that is now possible. Before now, employees are to go through arbitration, before they can go to NICN. But right now, it can be a court of first instance, and an aggrieved employee can approach NICN, and the case will be taken. I hope I've answered your question, Sheyi. All right, so Emmanuel here is saying, what happens to a grievance that is failed to be resolved? I've said earlier that it is not a must that an agreement must be reached. Sometimes it is better to agree to disagree. But whatever the issues are, whatever you've been able to identify from your mediation, you should be able to call a spade. Where somebody has approached an issue wrongly, I think that as HR practitioner, we should be fair, to identify this issue. We should speak truth to those concerned. And educate them from whatever we have seen in the course of your question, Emmanuel. Okay, I have a question here from Jessica. She says, okay, Jessica says, yes, what do you advise in a situation where the director instigated the conflict and grievance? Now, this is a bit tricky. If it is the director that is instigating this, I believe that as HR practitioner, we should have a way of communicating back to the directors so that they can also learn and communicate better if communication is the issue. I do agree that it's a tight place for HR practitioners to be if the grievance is coming or instigated by the director. But HR has a way of ensuring that this feedback is given. Now, it certainly will not be in a harsh manner. It certainly will not be a situation where you just walk up to him and say, director, you are wrong, the way you went about this thing. No, of course, you cannot approach it that way. You should be able to approach it in a subtle manner and then ensure that, the communication is done to avoid a reoccurrence. I hope I've been able to answer your question, Jessica. Now, Fumilayo here is saying, what happens if the committee is biased in their recommendations to management? Now, HR has a responsibility here. When you put a committee, you put members in a committee, you have to ensure that these are people who are credible, people who are fair, they are unbiased. If you have to provide trainings for them, on how to fairly handle issues like this, it is not a wrong thing to do. The committee you are putting together, the committee has to do a great job. If the committee is not doing a great job, then they will make the whole situation messier. So I will suggest that the HR themselves, the HR department itself, is able to identify people who are biased, people of integrity, and if possible, provide trainings for them to be able to function in that capacity. I hope I've been able to answer your question, Fumilayo. Jessica here is asking, in the name of not wanting the two units to be too close, accounts and audits, I'm not getting your question very well. I hope you can send it again and then shed more light. What is the role of the union in employee direct grievance? Now, the union is a stakeholder in the organization. The union is the one coming up with, if they identified a reason to be angry. For instance, they are feeling that their members are not getting benefits, they are not being promoted, like I mentioned in the course of my presentation, that we have to ensure that indeed we are fair in our approach, that these people are not unjustly treated because they are union members. If the process is clear, that's what you need to present to the union members, that look, this is our process and this is what we follow. If you feel your members did not benefit from it, prove to me that they met this criteria that we stated before we embarked on this journey. That's a way to address the issue. Sheyi. NIC, okay, that's what NICN is, National Industrial Court of Nigeria. Timothy is saying, what do you advise if during a mediation, the HR realizes it is the line manager who is at fault during a conflict? I believe that. So I believe that the HR representative has to be able to, Mr. Luyemi, you need to mute your device, please. So I believe that HR needs to speak truth to power. The manner of presentation is important. You can't just say, for instance, the line manager, you are the one that is at fault here. You didn't approach this issue. Where there should be a way to communicate this, but you have to speak truth to power so that issues can be properly addressed. Now, if you fail to do this, it's one of the complaints I raised earlier that, from the statistics that I shared, most employees who have raised issues around grievances feel that, it is not properly handled. The line manager is favored in the outcome and all of this. So HR has to be an unbiased umpire in issues like this. I have another question here from Ogunyemi. It says, how do you handle an employee who fail to conform with dressing and work ethics because he or she is connected with the MD or power that be in the system. Now, this can also be very tricky. I believe that, you know, for you to handle this, you have to start from the MD himself and make him understand, you know, what the issues are, and make him also understand how you intend to approach the issue. You know, sometimes if you just go all out to approach the issue, you may get your fingers burned. I'm not saying that if the MD does not support your approach, that you must drop it. But I believe that if you engage the MD in a conversation on what is going on and how you intend to approach it, you're likely going to get his support for you to be able to address the issues. I hope I've been able to answer your question, Ogunyemi. Sheyi says, query first, then warning. I agree with you, but you know, it's better to listen. You could give a query, it's better to listen and ensure that you know, both parties have been heard before you can follow with a warning. Timothy is saying, I think I've taken this question. What do you advise if during the mediation, the HR realizes is the line manager? I think I've spoken about this. Address it to them. All right, so I'm not seeing any further question. I see Sheyi's hand raised. Sheyi, do you want to speak? You can please unmute and speak. Sheyi, can you unmute? All right, so while we're waiting for Sheyi to unmute, Jessica has dropped a message here. She says, in line with my previous question, I mean the director instigating grievance and conflict between two departments because he believes that the only way he can get them to work independently is by instigating a conflict between head of audit and head of accounts. I understand what you're saying, Jessica. This is what a number of people call divide and rule. It's not an approach that will, you know, that will give desired results. Please, you need to unmute if you're not speaking. So I believe that this conversation has to start with the MD or the director, and to make him or her understand that this kind of approach would not, you know, make the organization give the set targets. Okay. All right. So that's all the questions that I can see here.
Okay, thank you.
I hope I've been able to answer all of. Okay, Sheyi, can you unmute? Can you speak now?
Yes, for that person connected to the MD, at times MD expects child to do his or her job, not minding the network or connection. Also, it can be seen to be, if you are not doing what you are supposed to do, they will think you can't take decisions even without the MD, and other managers are watching. So at times, if the relationship is cordial and you know it's a direct relationship with MD, you can first report that person to MD. When MD expects you as a standing HR to also follow your employee policy before you even come to him or her, that also makes us as HR professionals, you know, stand up to our responsibility. It's not also good that every time HR runs to the MD or whoever you are reporting to before you take some decisions that are in line with your document. It's the ones that you know that has something like at management discretion. That's when you can play around. But the ones that are just A plus B is 2, it's expected that HR takes such decisions before you go to that level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheyi. I totally agree with you.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Sorry, let me also
add to what Sheyi.
Let me also add a line to what Sheyi has said. At times, the dynamics of office place and executive office is always very, very tough. So many a time, even if it's the document, the policy states it categorically, you can make your recommendation, arm with it, and discuss. You understand? Because at times, if you are not sensitive, and you are saying because it is a policy and you have implemented, then what are you going to discuss? You understand? So if you are sensitive and you feel that it is not only at discretion, let me bounce it on the whoever you are reporting to. You can arm it according to section so and so and so and so. This is what is probable. So I just say I should discuss with you because that's my recommendation. We will respect you to know that you are firm, you are that, but not that you are going ahead to implement what discussed. That's just what I want to observe. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That's spot on too. I totally agree with you. My earlier comment was because, you know, the person who asked the question was saying that if it's the MD that is instigating it, and that's why I feel that you could start from having a discussion with the MD. You know, where it's not the MD or the director that is instigating it, I believe that HR should follow its process fairly to ensure that issues are addressed. Sarah, I see your hand. Do you want to speak? All right, so while we are waiting for Sarah, I think some questions have dropped on the chat box. Okoyemi is saying, what is your take on a situation whereby the top management of the organization are not treating employees well and the HR department is not able to intervene in that situation? People keep exiting the business and they keep recruiting people every now and then. I believe that HR can communicate to the management using statistics to justify whatever recommendations that they are pushing forward. It is very important that we know this. Sometimes all we need to be able to convince management is statistics, adequate statistics, and then recommendations that speak to the situation. It's important we do it that way. I also want to say that, you know, there are some organizations where these things may not work, but as HR, you have to do what is right. And if it's not working, you may want to consider, you know, taking a walk from such organization. Okoyemi says they keep bringing initiative that doesn't align with labor law and the HR organs are not able to make a change. This is a very terrible situation. You know, if HR is made to do what is wrong and is not able to, you know, resist it, it's a terrible place to be. One of the codes at CIPM says that, you know, we have to do the right thing, even if it means, you know, taking a walk from such organization. As HR, we should live up to the tenets of our profession, I believe. Sarah, are you able to speak now? Hello, Sarah, are you there?
I'm here. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for taking this subject. I really thank you a lot. Now, my question is, in a situation whereby an employee is not coming forth, you know, to escalate the grievance or the conflict, what should be done? Is it right for HR to now go and make a formal?
You are not very audible, Sarah. I'm finding it difficult to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Hello, Sarah. I'm finding it difficult to hear you. Yeah, it's better now.
Okay, so I was saying that in a situation whereby an employee is not coming forth to escalate to HR, is not saying all the grievances, is not saying anything, but you know there's a grievance going on. What should HR do in that sense? This employee is not coming out formally to make any formal complaint. You're not making any official complaint, but you know there's a grievance going on. And if you take an informal route, the grievance may, you know, degenerate into something else. What exactly can HR do so that it doesn't escalate or it doesn't degenerate into a bigger problem? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. I quite understand and I agree with you. I believe that as HR practitioners, the act of questioning is very important for us. They say that if you fail to ask the right questions, you may not get the right answers. You know, a lot of the times it depends on the questions that we ask. Sometimes you get people to speak and before they know it, they've already started talking. You know, you've observed there's the grievance issue on ground. The way you introduce, sometimes you may not even introduce it. It may be in the course of, you know, just chatting, you know, discussing. Before you know it, you've been able to lead the person into expressing what has happened. And then you give your own advice as to how it should be addressed. So I believe that the act of questioning is very important. You know, having a conversation that would give you an opportunity to see the inside of a person is very important, in my opinion. That's what I think should happen, Sarah. I hope I've been able to answer your question.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, I'm not here.
Hello, Sarah.
Sarah,
let me also
okay?
add a word. Sarah, there's also a place of counseling. If there's adequate regular communication and they have confidence in HR, you know that maybe because of the person involved, that's why the staff don't want to come out. then you can come in, let the person ask question, the right question as he has said, and cancel, so that they can live with the issue and yet still be able to be productive. Because if after a while he's not talking and nothing is done about it, the person can get, depressed, can get frustrated, and at some situation, the person will not be able to put his best. And it can also have bad one where it can become spiral, because we are talking about one person. What if there are more? It's more than one person that is affected by such actions. So HR has to be nosy to some extent, ask questions like you said, bring the act of counseling, calling people when they talk, oh, this is what happened anyway. I'm sure management maybe would not be able to do something daily, but however, our advice is to do this, don't let that weigh you down, And they begin to have confidence in you that you're able to identify the problem and you nip that problem in the bud before it becomes something that's affecting their productivity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marakinyo. Thank you. Sheyi, please go on.
I saw a question by Opeyomi on the chat box. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go on.
And he said,
please go on, Sheyi.
Okay, say management are not doing the right thing, blah, 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 and HR department is not doing one thing or the other. I think it's also it's time for HR to be mature in their disposition and in this line of business. It's not every time they tell you things to do and you just do it like that. Again, HR should be able to draw the line. I believe we are supposed to be seen as, at times, middle. At times, you need to properly let people understand that you are an HR professional. You are not for staff. You are for management. So there are some decisions that will be taken. You need to take your stand. It depends on the environment you find yourself.
All right, thank you so much, Sheyi. That's spot on. Okay, I'm not seeing any other question or any other hand raised. Okay. So, in the absence of any other question, comments, or contribution, I'd like to thank Mr. Oluyemi for this opportunity, and also thank participants for patiently, waiting for me, despite what the network has put us through this evening. Thank you once again. Back to you, Mr. Oluyemi. Are you there?
Thank you so much, Mr. Francis Elume Francis, for an excellent presentation. I also like to thank everybody who has joined us tonight, despite the challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a night. Please join us tomorrow around 7:30 for another interesting session. Ladies and gentlemen, let's appreciate Mr. Francis and show him some love.